All right, hey quants. I hope everyone had a chance to who's interested had a chance to take a look at the GridBot video that I did over the last few days, and I wrapped that up last Friday. I did go ahead and put the links to the description to those two scripts in the description for the YouTube channel, so you have access to those if you want to play around with it a little bit. The results were not spectacular as I thought they might come out to be, which is one of the reasons I was hesitant on that strategy overall, although I do think the grid, as I mentioned in the video, I do think the grid strategies can be very effective in a sideways market. And utilizing something like an SMA could definitely help improve those results so you don't have to change your grids around so much. So ultimately, I think it's a good theory. I think that particular strategy might need a little bit of work. The original one that I had implemented included a filter using the crown trend, and so which is just like a 21. I'm trying to remember what the other one is. 21, 55. What's the other one that he uses? I don't remember if it's the 100, but I have to look them up again to refresh my memory. But in any case, just using a trend filter like that to help filter out some of the signals. And so I didn't apply that, and I probably didn't catch that in the video when I was saying it, so I'm just mentioning it now. I'll probably come back to that in the future. I have a little bit of work that I want to do with skeleton key so that I can get that working, but it's not a high priority item for me right now. I've got some other AI project stuff that I'm working on, so that I can get something out with also working with Eric on this one. And so I think it's a really interesting project, and I've started to work on that a little bit last week, and I'm just kind of ramping the speed at which I'll be working on that up. And so that's kind of where my primary focus will be. But generally, when I'm working on a project like that, I tend to get a little bit, I don't know. Sometimes I get super focused and I'll just be dialed in, and that's where my 100% focus will stay. Sometimes I get a little bit tired of working on something, or I just get brain dead on looking at the same thing. And so what I will end up doing is switching to a side project for a few hours, half a day, maybe even a full day in the week, just to kind of let my brain cool off from what I'm currently working on and reset from that stuff, so that when I come back to it, it's fresh and I can be really hitting on all cylinders when I'm doing that stuff. So that stuff will be out in the future. So right now we're just going to come to another chart video here, and a few things that I wanted to follow up on is the square of 9 stuff that I'd been talking about before. I haven't included a lot of additional details on this yet. I might do that in the future, but I didn't prep for that right now, so I'm not going to do that. But I did want to mention, even though the signal did ultimately fail if you're trading straight from the equinox date, it did ultimately, after a turnaround, get up to the target that we were looking at for that square of 9s, or square of 9 date, which is really just like a multiple when you're looking at 9 squared values in the context of timing. So, however, even if you want to use something this even simpler, you could just use simple support and resistances. And so simple support resistance, we came back down, we hit support, we bounced off of there, and then we broke through. If you're following, again, just like some basic GAN swing trading, you had some entry signals around here, and then we got all the way up to where that target is, and really that is just hitting another area of support. So we had a little bit of a cluster of support right here, and that's, I think I probably mentioned that before when we were looking at this square of 9's target, is that, hey, it hits this area where that cluster is, and so I was expecting some resistance there, which is exactly what we're seeing here. One thing I think might be a good idea is, if you are in a position, or if you aren't in a position, to consider adding to your position or getting into a position around this area after we drop down a little bit more, provided we don't break some of these areas that were historically resistance areas. And so if you just kind of look at a band, you have maybe one area around here about 72.6, so $72,000 ish, and then up here we have another one right around about 70. That's pretty close to $75,000. So just around those, in between that area. So it's about $1,000 range, $3,000 range, where you could see that happen. But that might be a good area to load up. Of course, if you're going to play that game, you want to make sure that you're cut your losses if it continues to fall, because if it does continue to fall and fall back into that range, specifically around the $72,000 range, and then even the $70,000 range, once you get there, we're either back into the range or we're potentially retesting the support. And considering how many times this support has been tested, there's a good chance that we would ultimately get that breakthrough and fall down to the bottom and start heading towards some of the 50K numbers that people have been talking about that are still thinking it's going to go lower. I do not have an opinion whether I think it's going to go lower or higher in that regard, because frankly right now the signals have just been fairly difficult. And this just goes to the point of having a system that lets you play the game without getting emotionally involved. If you're a little bit indecisive on where you would do things, you just follow your system, right? So anyways, going back to this cluster area here, it was not a huge area, but I'm wondering if we zoom out a little bit, yeah, you can kind of see there were some other areas over here where that was clustered as support, and eventually turned into resistance. And then, yeah, we're not really getting closer to anything else there. So it doesn't look too strong. Looks, again, I think if we continue moving up here, we can, finally get that touch of the 80, between 80, get the touch of the 200 EMA and SMA, somewhere between there. And so eventually we might actually get that. Unfortunately, it wasn't when I was hoping we would get it way back here. Kind of tried to touch, didn't get all the way, and then it just bled out, right? And so this kind of pattern is what when I said adding as the price dropped might be a good idea, but you want to make sure you have your stops if you're going to play the game, is because you could end up doing this exact same thing where it looked like it was going to go up and might just continue to keep going up. Eventually get those 200 touches, and it didn't happen. It just turned around and then eventually fell all the way out, came back down, touched support, and then fell completely out of the bottom. And you don't want to ride that all the way down if you're doing short-term trading, right? So the other thing that I wanted to mention about that is you could also just wait for confirmation, which would be a break of one of the GAN pivot highs here. So that's another thing that you might look at if you're interested in that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the square and nines just so the chart looks a little cleaner. I think since those targets have all been hit now, I probably for now just go ahead and hide that. It's basically irrelevant. And I think if you were playing it very technically, you would have got out on the failure of that anyways, and you just would have either been using something else to get in for this trend, or you just totally missed it, which is, part of the game. So I wanted to turn this 16-year cycles back on, and I want to go up to the weekly trend. And I think this is really the bigger thing that I wanted to look at, because I see, well, it's not, I don't think I know this is the bigger thing that I wanted to look at, because I've heard a lot of people talking about, can this be the bottom, or is it too short of a time period? And so I know I put some of those values on here before. And so just a real quick refresher on this particular chart here. I measured top to tops and bottom to bottoms, and then I did a little some measurements here where it was top to bottom. And so the point about that is, what was the shortest potential target? And I covered this before, but I think this is something interesting to look at here, is what is the potential shortest target and what's the potential longest target. And so I had these two values here. So 56 bars, I believe, was the longest potential target that we would be looking at, and that would be November 2nd this year. The shortest target has actually already passed. And I don't know if I might have mentioned that, but I don't think I came back to this chart to show it. And so the shortest potential target would have been on March 16th. And so it did hit that low, and it's continued to go up. So I've heard some people say it would be the shortest bear market in history. And based on these top to bottoms that I measured, and I think this is it's always a good exercise to just go through some of this yourself, because you might look at it differently. You might grab different data. And at the end of the day, it's what data are you trusting? Are you just trusting something that somebody said, or are you collecting some data yourself and then building your own opinion based off of the data that you collect? And I think it's a lot easier to have more trust in the stuff that you do, and you can obviously listen to other people and see what they say, and you might have a stronger opinion or bias based on if there's a confluence of information there. But at the same time, personally, I find it very hard to just blindly trust what somebody has said and have a lot of conviction in a trade or a position that I put on if I go that route. And so from the way that I've measured this out, it is possible that it has bottomed already, and it would not be the shortest because the shortest would have been 23 bars. And so, I take that back. That would have been the shortest. Technically, if you count this wick low, this would, and so somebody did say it would be the shortest. And so I would agree with that in the sense that if you're measuring this wick low and not closures, then yes, this could have been the low, and that would have been the lowest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so that would have been like 15 bars instead of 23 bars. And so that technically would be shorter. However, it did range out at the base here for some period of time. I wouldn't say a really long time, but it did range out at the base here. And so, we're within the realm of being able, of seeing the start of another bull run. I'm not calling for a bull run just yet. I'm just saying it is possible that could be the case, and it wouldn't be completely out of the realm of what we've seen from the statistics in the past. So we're within that window now, and we really didn't start, even though we went up and kind of down. If you're looking at closures here, it was really pretty much flat, and these closures were low. There's a couple of closures here that were lower than this closure, even though it wasn't the wicks weren't lower. And so again, if you're basing that on closures, then I'm not measuring this exactly here, but one of these two were the lowest, and so it could have been even one day after, maybe a couple weeks, or I said one day, 1 week, or maybe 3 weeks before, despite which one, depending on which one of those was the lowest. Let's just take a real quick look here. 65,969. Yeah, so this one would have actually been the lowest, and so yeah, that would have been like 20 bars if we're using closures. Still the shortest. So technically, yeah, if you're that would be one way that you could frame that argument as being the shortest. But you were also just kind of going sideways here. So there's some evidence that we are trending up, right? And that's just not necessarily following the master strategy. We do have. On the macro time frame, we would want to see the daily 200s turn up, which we haven't seen yet, but we did get the 821 cross, and that's still up. GAN swing trends were still up, so that's all good. The very, very precursors of potentially starting a new macro trend up. It's not completely solidified yet, but I just wanted to kind of dig into this a little bit more. I'm not going to go into a bunch of the other charts. I think I'm just going to spend the time on this one, and we'll end it. Probably end it right about here. Just wanted to kind of share that information and come back and touch this because I will continue to track this. I think this is a interesting setup. I've seen other people that will continually put out similar charts that they put together. Again, back to what my main point, I put this one together, so I trust this one. It's interesting to see what other people say, and just like I had noted that some people had said it was the shortest, and I disagreed with that. Again, the disagreement is actually I would probably agree with them now that I just actually looked at this and took the value. So yes, you could argue that this is the shortest, even based on closures or wicks, either way. And so in that context, I would agree with them, but it just doesn't feel like that necessarily because you're ranging out at the bottom. But we tend to do that when things range out anyways. And if we continue to drop down, then we'll have another lower and obviously another lower low. And then we'll be looking out towards one of these, somewhere in here with the longest potentially being that 56 bars. And so if that's just like going to be very typical of how it plays out. So still within the range. I think I was repetitive enough about that as I could be. And so we will leave it there, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace, Quants.